Hello and welcome to Restoring Our American Republic. I'm Chuck Benoit with the nature of things where we are realigning God, government, and natural law so that we might restore our American Republic. Many of our founding fathers were as prophetic as they were wise. Andrew Jackson, in his presidential farewell address, said that eternal vigilance by the people is the price of liberty. And he also said that we pay the price if we wish to secure the blessings of freedom. He also said we have no longer any cause to fear danger from abroad because because of our strength and power, and that is from within, among ourselves, that we will lose these freedoms because of corruption, disappointed ambition, and inordinate thirst for power. That those were the factions that would be formed and endanger liberty. Now, President Trump is again showing the world that we are a powerful nation. But the left is attacking us with their false concerns about just about anything, but for instance, high gas prices and affordability. They forced gas prices higher because of their policies, but a temporary spike due to the developments in Iran, well, that's condemnable. Those factions President Jackson was concerned about are clearly being seen on the left. But people, please know that there are factions on the right doing the same thing. Um, right here in the great state of Florida, as a matter of fact. And with that off my chest, good morning, Mike Levine.
Good morning, Chuck. I'll tell you, Chuck, this is going to be an interesting conversation as we get into Senate Bill 354, because I'm going to bring some things to the audience's attention that they might not have thought about otherwise.
Well, I'm sure. Well, yeah, this, I guess it's SB 354, Blue Ribbon Projects. And what we
Right.
find out,
Just for the
not
record, that's
necessarily in the
committee
bill, but
substitute, committee substitute, committee substitute, which means this has been through three committees, and every committee stop substituted the originally filed bill with the bill coming out of their committee. And then it went to the next committee, and the next committee substituted the previous committee's bill. Then it went to a third committee and got substituted again. Okay. So that's what we're talking about. CS, 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 three substitutes for the original bill. Chuck.
yeah, so just a few factoids before we get into the bill. Approximately 15% of Florida land is developed. Another 27% are considered protected natural conservation land. But we are losing rural land very, very rapidly. Over 2 million acres of ranch, timberland, farms are at risk of being paved over by 2070. That's some pretty eye-opening statistics.
People really have to understand, which I don't. Um, we really need to model land use to make sure that as we put these development plans in place, that we are properly allocating land for the needs of our people. And of course, the easy example is farmland. So if you have, like right now, I think we have 22, some people might say 24 million people living in the state of Florida. Well, how much farmland are we going to need when we have 50 million people living in Florida? And Florida's population could easily double over, let's just call it 50 years. I'm pretty sure it'll double. So the question becomes, are we doing analytics to determine how much of certain each land use do we actually need? And the answer is no, we're not. And the reason we don't do it is because we don't want to know. We just want to do what's good for us right now and let the next generation figure it out, Chuck.
Yes, well, kind of getting into the bill a little bit. We can't obviously read the entire bill, but let's just start here. The legislature intends to create blue ribbon projects and to provide a mechanism by which a local government shall implement those projects within their boundaries. Now, that sounds like the local government has some say in this, huh?
I would say in this particular bill, the local government does have some say in it, and we'll get into it in more detail. But what I'm saying to you is this, something, for example, um, I want to think about this in the context of collectivism. Because, like, for example, we're about to identify, the bill specifies that these blue ribbon projects have a minimum acreage of 15,000 acres. And the owner of a 15,000 or more acre tract of land must go through certain steps, document their 15,000 acre project to be compliant with this law, which it will be law, it's going to be passed into law. And then they become the developer over 15,000 acres. So I'm not sure this is good for developers. I mean, it really is going to centralize the development process in the state of Florida to a very small number of land barons who own tracts that are 15,000 acres or more, Chuck. So, I mean, when you talk about, um, eliminating the middle class, destroying the middle class, lowering household incomes, this is how it's done. When you centralize major aspects of the economy into the hands of a very few people, you strip the middle class of earning potential, Chuck.
Yeah, I think that's probably more of what we want to talk about as far as necessarily reading the bill. But clearly, for instance, the bill is, the intent is to promote the goals of preserving natural areas, encouraging agricultural land use and rural land stewardship, protecting critical ecological systems, expanding wildlife corridors, and providing for more compact misused development designed for long-term viability. So all that sounds like they really want to do a lot of nice things.
Keyword compact mixed use, which goes right back to everything that we've seen since 2023 with the Live Local Act, higher densities, the whole urban dream. But I'm saying to you, Chuck, I don't care what this legislation says. There's somebody at the top of the food chain saying that when I get this done, and this bill has been through three committees in the Florida House under House Bill 299, it passed through three committees in the Florida House, it's passed through three committees in the Florida Senate. So it's going to the governor's desk, and somebody at the top of the food chain is saying, wow, when I put a blue ribbon project over my 15,000 acre up to or 25,000 acres, I have just locked down the development rights for real estate development in Florida for the next 50 to 75 years, Chuck, which is going to put a lot of small developers out of business because they won't be able to compete, Chuck.
Yeah, well, these are the concerns that we all have. Moving right along on our little list of things to talk about. Um, uh, it sounds like this is good that development areas may not contain data centers. Is
That's
that
just a hot issue. And of course, I'm glad it's in the bill. So if the bill's going to pass, I'd like for that to be in it. But keeping in mind, Chuck, that President Trump, I'm pretty sure, has put out an executive order stating that data centers developed in the United States must provide their own energy. And of course, I think we probably have talked about the advances in nuclear energy, which is going to make energy production uh, a lot more practical, not just in the state of Florida, but in the United States and around the world. So the data center thing doesn't bother me as much as long as the data center is not going to be on the grid, Chuck.
there you go. Um, I, I think we've mentioned this a little bit, but it's the next thing on our list that we wanted to make sure we touched base on was the property must contain a minimum of 15,000 acres of land use which are land which are contiguous, and it's owned by the same
Contiguous.
person or by entities
Mm.
owned or controlled by the same person. So again, I guess maybe that speaks to your land baron issue.
It totally does. It speaks to my land baron issue. So, and you know, it's amazing. I'm going to have to make a few phone calls to some of my land baron friends and just see what they have in mind for their 15,000 plus development plans. Because I got news for you. There's a little handful of people in Florida that are very interested in getting this across the finish line, Chuck.
Yeah, well, I'm very, very sure of that. So again, another point that's probably good to some degree, 60% of the land contained in the project must be reserve area.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you know, I guess until you actually become a planner, a educated planner, you be able to decide whether that's a good number or not. It sounds like a pretty good number, 60%, which means 40% is going to be developable. And then you're going to get into of the 40%, how much is going to be residential, how much is going to be commercial, et cetera. But until you start seeing the development maps, Chuck, you're really not going to have to be able, and most people have not seen development maps. So it's really hard for somebody who's never seen a development map to conceptualize what that large swath of land is going to look like once the concrete starts getting poured, Chuck.
Yeah, well, again, you mentioned,
But let's assume that 60% is reasonable. Okay. Let's assume that that's reasonable. We can kind of move on off of that point.
yeah, again, of course, just typical math tells us that 40% of the land contained in the project can be developed. And there are some requirements that have to be met in order for them to be developed, for it to be developed. And one of those issues is enhanced walkability and mobility and must include a mixture of land uses. So it's, from my perspective, it seems to me like they're doing everything they can to make it unnecessary to have a car, and that maybe that's the way that they're going to try to deal with the traffic issues that are just all around us. What say you?
Yeah, I agree with that. Again, this has been in the works for decades. I remember long, long time ago, I used to sit on a board called Smart Growth, and these are the same exact talking points that Smart Growth proposed. I'm going to use the number 20 years ago. And so this is basically, people have to understand too, for our grassroots audience, that this legislation doesn't happen overnight. And the evolution of society doesn't happen quickly. So as we support and oppose, various different legislative issues, it's really frustrating if we don't get what we want immediately. But it's very unusual to have major um, policy developments happen quickly. And most people just, we're kind of an immediate gratification society these days, and we expect to get what we want immediately. And historically, that's just not how it works. As I'm pointing out, that this growth management plan with, clusters of density connected by mass transportation is the long-term view, which is a very European view of development. And we've been on this road for quite a while, Chuck.
Yeah, for sure. So anyway, moving along, the development area must have a dense, walkable, mixed-use development pattern. Again, I
There you
think
go.
we're talking all around that, right? This is the whole idea of not needing a vehicle.
Right. And pretty soon, we're going to get to the point that says that it is presumed that this development plan that this land baron has put together is consistent with local government's comprehensive plan. That is presumed. So when you get into that, and we'll talk about it again when we get to that point in the conversation, but if the development plan for these large tracts of land are inconsistent with local comprehensive plans, then your Board of County Commissioners, or your, I would say in most cases, this can be the county. Oh, by the way, this does say that these large tracts of land cannot be included in municipalities. So they're all county. And then the question becomes, are we going to have these massive developments in unincorporated areas, which I'm opposed to? I mean, I don't like cities. So we really need to wrap our mind around whether it's good to have these high density projects in unincorporated areas. Of course, the county is an incorporated area, but you understand where I'm going with that, because this bill does specifically specify that these blue ribbon projects cannot exist in municipal incorporated areas, Chuck. So anyway, I'm sorry to get on that rabbit hole, but as my mind started walking through the implications of this bill, it took me to that place as I read over as I've studied this legislation for the last couple of days. That's kind of where my mind went. So all of this stuff is going to happen in unincorporated areas, and your Board of County Commissioners will be able to deny the application. But of course, then there's legal remedies. If the county commission denies, then the applicant can go to court, and there are remedies in court. So let's move on, Chuck.
Yeah, okay. Well, there again, requirements, a maximum residential density of 12 units per gross acre.
And that's across all residential development types. Single family, detached, single family, attached, multifamily, etc., over the gross area, right? So let's assume you have 15,000 acres and 40% of it is developable and 75% of it is going to be residential. That means you've got 3,000 acres times 12 units an acre. That's 36,000 housing units on 30 acres. So that sounds to me like some pretty high density when you look at when it says 12 units per acre on the gross land acreage dedicated to residential. So that's pretty high density from where I'm sitting, Chuck.
Yeah, it does sound like it. And it goes on to say a maximum non-residential intensity of 85% impervious surface ratio. That's talking about
basically that impervious ratio means that when it rains, water absorbs into the ground, permeates into the ground. So basically it's saying that for the commercial areas, they can pour concrete on 85% of the commercial areas, which I also find to be pretty high density, Chuck.
Yeah, I guess I kind of feel the same way. I feel like we don't have enough land. I mean, obviously, this past year we didn't really have a hurricane issue, but that's all we need is a hurricane issue. And even without the hurricane, we had a lot of water damage, right? Up by your way, there was a
So
lot
the 15% of the property that cannot be covered with impervious materials are drainage canals, effectively, right? They're let's see, retention ponds, right? I mean, really, that's at the 15%. So 85% of the commercial areas can be covered with impervious material, and the other 15% are retention ponds and drainage canals. That's what it is.
Yeah, I get it. Well, we definitely need land. We need dirt. to pick up some of this water. I mean, some of our just normal rainfall is so massive that it creates a flooding area just when it rains, let alone hurricanes.
And keep in
Moving
mind,
along,
Chuck,
it says here
in your
at
in
least,
your in your opening, Chuck, you said that only 15% of the property in Florida is developed, right?
well, it's all
So
developed in the same place, though, Mike. There's not a lot of turnaround.
I get it. So it's a really interesting study. Continue. Sorry.
Okay, well, it said at least 20% of the residential units within the development area in each phase of the project must be a combination of the following. And the first one is housing that is affordable. What does that mean?
And then it references statute 420 dot something 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 where the definition of affordable is, and as we know from the Live Local Act, that affordable based on the extremely low, etc., covers everything up to about 20% over median household income. So if you're a family making $75,000 a year household income, then you're going to fall into that affordable housing category. You'll be eligible for affordable housing, Chuck.
Okay. Um, housing that is affordable. Missing middle housing. Now that's
Yeah,
a
let's
term
not get into that, Chuck.
yeah, we don't want to get
Let's
into
skip over the
that.
middle. Yeah, that's an, I mean, we're just wasting our time going through the definitions of what this stuff is. I want to
Okay.
talk about the actual impact of this legislation on our communities and our state, Chuck.
Well, that works for me. You alluded to this earlier, but this is our final major point. To develop the rights and mitigation of project impacts shall be vested for 50 years. And then within the 50 years after the project's date of initial public dedication of infrastructure, the vested period must be extended for an additional 25 years. So that's like multi-generational ownership and an
Yeah,
activity.
it's a 75-year development plan. So these persons or entities, land barons, who own 15,000 contiguous acres or more, they are going to be controlling development in the state of Florida for the next 75 years, Chuck. And I'm telling you, look at a lot of small developers are going to be put out of business. Now, let's talk about that, right? So what happens now? If a typical land baron owns 15,000 acres of land or more, typically what happens is over time, the developers are constantly calling on these people. You know, from a salesman's point of view, okay, I'm calling the owners of these large tracts of land saying, hey, we want to buy your land, right? And you're basically in the development corridor. And as you get into the whole conversation around development, right? You're like in the path of services where it makes sense for us to put in residential rooftops, because residential rooftops come before commercial development, because you can't have a strip center with retail in it unless you have somebody to buy the goods that are being sold in the strip centers. So the residential rooftops come first, and then behind it comes the commercial. Okay. So developers are calling on these landowners all the time, and the landowners understand that they hold all the cards. So the typical response to a developer who says, I'd like to buy 100 or 500 or 1,000 acres of your property, they're saying, well, when you get up to X number of dollars per acre, let me know. But until you can pay me, 20,000 an acre, 50,000 an acre, 75,000 an acre, whatever the landowner's target price is, they literally just talk to the developers. They say, well, as soon as you're ready to pay me 30 grand an acre or whatever the number is, right, then come back then. And then the developer goes back and he starts getting his pencil out and he says, well, if I had to pay 30,000 an acre, how could I get a return on my investment in this land? And that's the constant back and forth between developers and landowners. But when you put in a blue ribbon project law into the state of Florida that says these land barons can completely set up the entire development plan, but keep in mind, Chuck, it has to be owned by these parcels of land have to be owned by one entity. So once they get their entitlement, how is that going to happen? Because typically when you have a large planned unit development, PUD is the acronym. Basically, once you get the PUD, then sections of that PUD are typically sold off to smaller developers. So I'm assuming that that's what would happen here. But if that's true, why are we even doing this? You know, I mean, it's kind of weird if you ask me, Chuck.
Yeah, well, there's just so much more to this bill. We thought we would want to at least get through this, and we have. We have a few minutes left. I was just wondering, if you saw Leslie Campione's post this morning on Facebook. Um,
I did, and I responded to it.
okay, good. Well, just in case anyone else out there hasn't seen it yet, I'll just kind of read the first part of it, and maybe you can expound on that. That should take us to our time limit. She says the Florida legislature is obliterating growth management in Florida. It has been going on for several years, and this session it is far worse. Multiple bills and amendments are currently pending that will take away current zoning and density limitations on rural lands. Our county commissioners have been working really hard to establish no annexation zones and rural boundaries through agreements with the cities in Lake County. And she goes on, it's a bit of a, well, not long, but certainly does kind of feed right into what we were talking about this morning. And was wondering if you had anything to say about that.
What's the solution, Leslie? What are we going to do about it? Okay, that's my concern. I love Leslie. Okay, super. I mean, I tell you, I have the highest respect for her. Super smart. Not that I agree with every decision that she makes, but she seems to be aligned with grassroots in this particular situation. You know, Leslie's pro-development. Okay, she's a land use attorney, so you can't say that Leslie Campione is anti-development. She's not. But when she sees the overreach that honestly, Chuck, began with the really got hyper amped up with this Live Local Act that you working on my campaign, beginning in 2023 when Live Local was passed, all the way through 2024, Leslie support is on our side of that argument. But the problem with I have with what Leslie posted today is, what's the solution, Leslie? So I put into her Facebook post after she posted that. It's so interesting that you saw it as I did. What are the next steps? Does this mean that we put together a delegation of people from Lake County and go lobby the legislature or the governor to veto this bill? Because it's going to pass. It's going to pass on the floor of the House. It's going to pass on the floor of the Senate. It's going to the governor's desk. And the only way to stop it from becoming a law would be for the governor to veto it. So, Leslie, are we going to bring a group of people to Tallahassee to lobby against this bill at the 11th hour? Or do we just talk to our legislative delegation and every single one of them vote for it? You know, Stan McLean was our state rep from the north part of Lake County before he and Keith Trunell went into the Senate. McLean sponsored this bill on the Senate side. So our own legislative delegation is voting for this. How do we stop it? Leslie? And again, no disrespect intended. It's a legitimate question. What are we going to do about it?
An honest question from an honest constituent. Hopefully that is clear. Well, Mike, we are literally out of time. Do you want a few minutes to just recap?
I- I'm done, Chuck.
You're done. Okay, well then, thanks, Michael
But
Levine.
let me
And
do a little
thank
quick
you all
recap.
again
Let
for,
me do a little quick recap. There
okay.
you go. Put me back on.
All right.
Yeah. Well, the recap is this, ladies and gentlemen, that as more and more, this is a classic example of more and more wealth being controlled by fewer and fewer people, which is the global trend, the world trend. It's everything we're fighting here in the United States. It's on steroids here in the state of Florida. And, because we've had some successes with abortion rights, with Second Amendment rights, and things like that, with healthcare, freedom, things like that. We think we're winning, and okay, in some arenas we are, but economically we're getting pummeled. Thank you, Chuck.
And thank you, Mike Levine. And thank you all for tuning into our twice weekly live stream. Again, please follow us on Facebook at Restoring Our American Republic. Check us out on YouTube at Restoring Our American Republic ROAR. Please like and share the program. And remember, if you are unwilling to govern yourself, you will be governed by tyrants. Until next time, God bless you. God bless President Donald J. Trump. And God bless America.